The desert stretched like an unbroken sheet of amber, the sun hanging low and indifferent, baking the sand until it shimmered like a mirage playing tricks on the weary soldiers. Sergeant Calloway squinted at the horizon, shielding his eyes with one gloved hand while the other clutched his rifle, which felt heavier than it should after 3 cups of overly sweet military coffee. He wasn't sure if he was imagining it, but the heat haze seemed to ripple with purpose, as if the air itself were conspiring to confuse him. Private Diaz nudged him with an elbow. "Sarge, is that, I don't know, moving? Or is my brain melting in real time?" Calloway swore under his breath, trying to decide whether it was sand, hallucination, or some kind of cosmic prank. The shimmer solidified, forming shapes that hovered above the dunes, metallic and impossibly smooth, reflecting the sun in ways that made Calloway's retinas squint harder. "I told you the desert had secrets," he muttered, though nobody had asked. The shapes descended slowly, deliberately, and with a grace that made the soldiers' boots seem comically clunky. When the ships finally touched the ground, the sand around them hissed and rolled as if alive, raising mini dust storms that whipped around their legs. Out of each ship stepped a woman, but not quite like any woman they'd seen before. At first they could have passed for humans, the same height, similar proportions, but then the ears caught their attention. Long, tapering backward like an elegant wind instrument, twitching subtly as if tuned to frequencies invisible to human senses. Armor clung to them, not heavy or cumbersome but sleek and functional, catching the light in glints that made the soldiers glance at each other in silent awe. Private Kim whispered, Do they hear sarcasm?" A laugh bubbled out of someone, Corporal Reeves, if memory served, before being quickly smothered by the desert's awkward tension. One of the aliens raised her hand, fingers splayed, and performed what could only be described as a salute/dance. It was fluid, practiced, precise, and entirely unhuman in execution. Calloway, torn between discipline and the urge to laugh, returned a clumsy half-salute that might have looked like a broken propeller. The alien paused, ear twitching, and for a fraction of a second, the soldier swore she tilted her head in amusement. Communication attempts began cautiously. The aliens did not speak in recognizable words at first, only emitting a series of hums and pulses, which the human interpreters tentatively tried to translate into words. One alien stepped closer, ears flicking like radar dishes, and mimicked the human's awkward salute again, as if encouraging participation. Private Diaz muttered under his breath, "Is this some sort of dance-off challenge?" The rest of the squad snickered quietly, despite themselves. After a few tense minutes, the aliens produced devices that shimmered and rotated in ways that defied conventional mechanics, projecting holographic images into the air. Soldiers leaned forward, eyes wide, recognizing landscapes of planets they didn't know existed, animals that looked like floating jellyfish with claws, and cities that hung in orbit around suns. "Well," Calloway said, rubbing his temple, "either we're about to make first contact or we're about to die really confused." One of the aliens extended a hand, and though it was delicate, it radiated a strange warmth. Calloway shook it, careful not to break the bones he assumed were there, and was startled when a pulse of understanding, or maybe static, passed through him. It wasn't telepathy exactly, but close enough to make him wonder if he'd suddenly learned a few words in a language he didn't know he'd ever spoken. By the time the sun reached its zenith, the soldiers and the alien women had established a kind of fragile rhythm. Humans demonstrated the coffee machine from the base, and the aliens watched it with rapt fascination, ears twitching in amusement whenever someone misfired hot liquid. One alien woman reached out a slender finger and touched the steaming cup, and the coffee swirled unnaturally, suspended in midair before returning to the cup. Private Kim yelped, almost spilling the rest of the beverage on himself, and the aliens emitted a sound that the humans interpreted as laughter. The desert suddenly seemed less hostile, more like a stage for something entirely unpredictable. Corporal Reeves attempted a joke. "Do you guys ever get tired of glowing armor?" The nearest alien tilted her head, ears flicking, and in perfect English said, "We glow for emphasis. You humans glow with panic." Time blurred. Humans and aliens experimented with each other's technology. A small drone that could only hover 3 feet off the ground for humans zipped around the aliens, who caught it midair with a grace that made everyone else look like clumsy toddlers. In return, the aliens offered devices that bent light and refracted it, causing soldiers to vanish and reappear like optical illusions, inducing screams and laughter in equal measure. One soldier, sliding down a sand dune after accidentally tripping over a floating holographic console, was caught mid-fall by an alien whose ears flicked rhythmically, holding him just long enough for him to recover dignity, or what little he had left. Evenings were less tense. The sun's descent painted the dunes gold and copper, and the desert whispered with wind, laughter, and the hum of alien tech. Soldiers sat in small clusters, eating rations while aliens hovered above the sand, occasionally touching it so lightly it seemed they were playing invisible instruments. Conversations emerged, awkward at first, then warming. A soldier asked why the aliens traveled so far to Earth. The answer was delivered with deadpan simplicity: "We were bored." Also, someone mentioned your sunsets are particularly mediocre, but entertaining. The humans laughed harder than they probably should have, spilling portions of their synthetic protein bars in the sand. The aliens' ears twitched with amusement. By nightfall, the stars were no longer just distant points but stories in motion. Alien ships gleamed faintly in the dark, human flashlights bobbed, and laughter intertwined with hums of curiosity. The first meeting had not ended in conflict but in confusion, fascination, and an absurd sense of camaraderie. Soldiers caught themselves explaining jokes the aliens didn't need explained, while aliens observed human quirks: hair, boots, the inexplicable rituals of eating, that seemed to be endlessly entertaining. Somewhere in the desert, a coyote howled at the night, possibly judging both species, but nobody cared. For the first time, humans and alien warrior women weren't adversaries or strangers. They were participants in a dance of misunderstanding, curiosity, and humor, one awkward shuffle at a time. And as Sergeant Calloway watched the alien woman closest to him, ears flicking like delicate antennae, he thought, half seriously, half terrified, that if the universe had more visitors like these, Earth might survive after all, or at least have a really good story to tell. Morning broke over the desert in a reluctant shimmer, as though the sun had forgotten its cue and was now apologizing by spilling gold and rose across the dunes. The soldiers stirred in the sandy tents, rubbing eyes that were still half dreaming of alien ears and hovering ships, while the aliens had already been moving for some time, hovering slightly above the ground or inspecting their equipment with meticulous precision. One of them, tall and impossibly graceful, traced patterns in the sand with a fingertip, leaving glowing, fractal-like trails that vanished only when a curious wind nudged them aside. Private Diaz, stumbling over his boots and tent lines, nearly collided with her, and the alien's ears flicked sharply in what he interpreted as silent disapproval. Do you know how to walk?" He muttered, and she tilted her head, speaking in the soft, amused tone humans would recognize as teasing. "We hover. Walking is for emergencies." He blinked, imagining the report he'd give back at base, then shrugged. Emergencies were apparently terrifyingly boring in the alien lexicon. By mid-morning, the humans and aliens had established what Sergeant Calloway jokingly called a mutual observation hub, though it quickly became clear that it was anything but orderly. Alien technology sprawled across the sand, devices that bent light to create floating holograms, a small sphere that sang in perfect harmony with the wind, and a gadget that could instantly cool a human beverage to ice without touching it. Soldiers poked at everything with a mixture of fascination and fear, occasionally tripping over anti-gravity cables that looked like glowing spaghetti. One of the aliens, seeing a human soldier nearly fall over, reached out, ear flicking, and guided him upright without touching him directly, as though manipulating an invisible string. Private Kim, staring in awe, whispered, "Either they're psychic or I just failed physics again." The alien made a soft sound that could have been laughter or a very polite sigh, leaving him questioning his entire existence. In a quiet lull, the soldiers tried to show the aliens something distinctly human: coffee making. It began with a demonstration of a simple brewing process but quickly devolved into chaos. Diaz dropped a filter, Reeves spilled hot water, and one alien, curious about the fumes, waved a hand over the cup, causing the liquid to levitate, swirl, and glow like molten amber. "I said coffee, not a lava fountain," Reeves muttered, backing away with a mix of fear and admiration. The aliens, meanwhile, flicked their ears in synchronized amusement, eyes twinkling with mirth that humans could almost, but not quite, decipher. Another alien plucked a stray coffee bean and made it orbit around her finger, creating a tiny gravitational field that caused everyone to stumble backward. Sergeant Calloway groaned and muttered, "Next time we just bring instant." Time passed in a delicate balance between chaos and camaraderie. The aliens taught the humans small tricks with their devices, bending light to create decoys, reading vibrations in the air to detect movement, and sensing the faintest fluctuations in temperature that could signal a distant predator or an overeager drill sergeant. In return, the soldiers introduced them to less vital but equally entertaining human practices: the concept of competitive protein bar consumption, tactical dance routines, which involved tripping over one another in rhythm, and the inexplicable joy of arguing over whose turn it was to carry a comically oversized tent pole. Even the most serious among the aliens seemed to relax, ears flicking in time with human laughter that carried across the dunes. Then came the small accident that defined the morning. Private Diaz, attempting to operate an alien anti-gravity cooking pod, pressed a button too enthusiastically. The pod shot into the air, flipping upside down, and launched a perfectly cooked meal like a frisbee at Sergeant Calloway. Calloway, caught mid-dig, ended up spinning in a bizarre arc, dinner and dignity suspended together, until one of the aliens, hovering gracefully, reached out, ears twitching, and guided him back to the ground. The soldiers erupted in laughter while the aliens emitted a synchronized sound that was both amusement and a faint admonishment. "We were told humans are clumsy," one alien commented, ears twitching rhythmically, "but this surpasses even your recorded standards." Curiosity between species deepened as the day unfolded. Humans marveled at the aliens' physiology, particularly the long ears that seemed to function as more than aesthetic elegance. By tilting and rotating them subtly, the aliens detected vibrations in the air, magnetic fluctuations, and even patterns of energy invisible to human senses. One soldier, squinting, remarked, "So, your ears are basically a Swiss Army knife for the cosmos." The alien nearest him flicked her ears and replied dryly, "Swiss Army knives are quaint. We prefer subtle sophistication." Diaz laughed despite himself, bumping his helmet against the nearest glowing console, which reacted by projecting a holographic bird that sang in 3 dimensions. The alien observed, ears quivering in amusement, and said, "Your species' fascination with noise is charming." By afternoon, experimentation gave way to play. Holograms of alien creatures swirled through the air as soldiers tried to mimic their shapes, resulting in half-recognizable beasts that somehow seemed livelier than intended. One alien created a small field where gravity fluctuated subtly, causing soldiers to float a few inches above the sand before gently landing again, eliciting a mixture of screams and laughter. Private Kim declared he was now officially terrified and exhilarated in equal measure, while the aliens seemed to enjoy watching humans confront physics without grace. "Your species' relationship with gravity is complicated," an alien noted, her ears flicking with precise rhythm. Sergeant Calloway muttered, "Complicated is one word, chaotic disaster is another." Evening came quietly, with the sun setting in streaks of crimson and violet. The desert was no longer a place of tension or fear, but a strange communal space where humans and aliens traded jokes, stories, and the occasional mishap. One alien, hovering slightly above the ground, leaned toward a soldier and whispered with a straight face, "We came across galaxies for boredom, yet your protein bars are truly intriguing." Laughter erupted. Another soldier tripped over a holographic projection and disappeared momentarily, only to reappear mid-giggle, and the aliens responded with a symphony of low-frequency chuckles that sounded like wind through chimes. Bonds, fragile but undeniable, were forming, built on shared absurdity, curiosity, and the thrill of experiencing the unknown together. As night fell, the stars above were not just distant points of light, but glimpses of entire worlds and stories waiting to be discovered. Soldiers and aliens alike sat quietly, sharing what they had learned about each other, the aliens hovering or perching delicately while human knees creaked in the sand. They told jokes that required translation, demonstrated skills that required cooperation, and watched in awe as a small desert fox crept silently past, unbothered by the cosmic gathering. Sergeant Calloway observed the alien nearest him, ears twitching like subtle antennae, and thought, half seriously, half humorously, that if this was what first contact looked like, he could survive the galaxy, or at least have a hell of a story to tell. The night was a fragile bridge between species, built on curiosity, laughter, and a slow, tentative understanding that neither humans nor alien warriors had anticipated. Somewhere far above, the ships glimmered like distant eyes, patient and watchful, as the desert hummed with the improbable alliance of two species learning that sometimes the universe was stranger and funnier than anyone could have imagined. The sun rose over the desert in a slow, deliberate sweep, painting the dunes in copper and rose gold as if the world itself were stretching awake. Sergeant Calloway rubbed his face, still half amused, half dazed from the previous day's chaos. Around him, human soldiers scurried to gather equipment, and alien warrior women hovered gracefully above the sand, ears flicking as they inspected everything with precise attention. Calloway realized as he watched them that the desert no longer felt hostile. It was a place alive with laughter, curiosity, and improbable cooperation. The morning began predictably, unpredictably. A small squadron of alien drones, each shaped like a floating crystalline beetle, zipped around the humans, projecting miniature holographic targets for target practice. Private Kim yelped when one accidentally nudged his helmet, sending him sprawling, and the nearest alien's ears twitched in what could only be amusement. "Humans are resiliently clumsy," she remarked, voice calm but carrying a subtle humor that made Kim want to apologize and laugh at the same time. Calloway shook his head and muttered, "Resiliently clumsy. That's my new rank, apparently." But the day was not all games. Reports of energy fluctuations reached the camp, signs that other extraterrestrial presences lurked on the outskirts of the desert. Calloway frowned, adjusting his gear. Higher-ranking officers from the base arrived, bringing paperwork, orders, and a sense of impending bureaucratic doom. "We need to secure the perimeter." One of them barked, oblivious to the aliens' amused glances. One alien woman hovered in front of the officer, ears twitching slowly, and said in a flat tone, "Perimeter is a concept. Chaos is an art." The officer blinked, muttered something about discipline, and stormed off, leaving the soldiers to share quiet snickers behind their helmets. Cooperation became urgent. Humans and aliens had to combine skills, instincts, and technology to investigate the energy readings. Calloway led the team, relying on both human intuition and alien sensory perception. They moved through the dunes like a strange symphony, soldiers tripping occasionally, aliens gliding with calculated grace, ears flicking to pick up vibrations invisible to human senses. At one point, a scout yelled, "Something's moving in the dunes." only for an alien warrior to wave her hand and reveal a mirage of shifting light, a harmless sandstorm manipulated with subtle energy fields. The soldiers groaned collectively, while the aliens chuckled softly, ears quivering rhythmically, almost like a cosmic giggle. As the day unfolded, true partnership solidified. Alien devices bent light to cloak humans from distant sensors, while soldiers taught aliens how to improvise with terrain. Private Diaz, still nursing a bruised ego from yesterday's gravity mishap, found himself working side by side with one of the aliens, replicating a tactical maneuver that involved floating rocks, holographic decoys, and a human-inspired distraction that made everyone, especially the aliens, laugh. "You humans are absurdly clever," the alien commented dryly, ears flicking in amusement, "or absurdly reckless. It is hard to tell." Diaz grinned, realizing that in this chaos both were compliments. Later, the team discovered the source of the energy fluctuations, a dormant, partially buried alien vessel from a distant system. It pulsed faintly, a relic of a war long forgotten, its technology dormant but dangerous. The soldiers hesitated and Calloway's mind raced. One wrong move could ignite the buried vessel, attracting unwanted attention from other galactic factions. The aliens examined it, ears twitching in thought, and one muttered, "Imprudence here could be entertaining." Calloway rolled his eyes, but he listened, trusting the instincts that had saved his squad through absurd coffee fountains, floating protein bars, and gravity mishaps. Together, they devised a plan. Neutralize the vessel's energy output using a combination of alien manipulation fields and human improvisation. It was delicate, nerve-wracking, and occasionally hilarious. Private Kim accidentally pressing the wrong panel 3 times, only to have the alien correct him with a single flick of her ears that emitted a barely audible hum of reprimand. Hours later, the vessel was secured. It no longer pulsed threateningly, but sat inert, a monument to collaboration between species who had barely managed to understand each other days before. The soldiers and aliens gathered around, sharing quiet sighs of relief. Calloway felt a strange swell of pride, not in himself, but in the absurd, improbable team they had become. They had survived miscommunication, gravity mishaps, coffee disasters, and the occasional bureaucratic officer, and emerged wiser, closer, and capable of more than any one species could have imagined alone. As the sun dipped low, painting the desert in shades of gold and violet, the aliens prepared to depart. Their ships hovered gracefully, engines humming a soothing vibration that resonated through the sand. Soldiers stood in formation, half saluting, half waving, unsure how to properly bid farewell to beings who were both terrifyingly powerful and impossibly humorous. One alien approached Calloway, ears flicking in a deliberate, almost ceremonial rhythm. She extended a hand, warm and oddly reassuring. "You have adapted well, human. Your species' chaos is endearing." Calloway shook it, smiling despite himself. "And you've taught us a lot about patience and gravity." The alien tilted her head, ears twitching in what could only be amusement. The final moments were quiet, almost ceremonial. The ships rose slowly, sand swirling beneath them, ears flicking in rhythm to the soft pulse of energy fields. Soldiers waved, laughed, and shared awkward jokes with aliens who hovered gracefully above, mirroring gestures imperfectly but with intention. Calloway, watching them disappear into the sky, felt a shift within himself. He realized he was no longer the same rigid, slightly cynical sergeant who had first squinted at the shimmering horizon. He had learned to trust instincts beyond human perception, to find humor in danger, and to appreciate that alliance